They stuck her on ammunition depot guard duty because she looked like someone who'd never held anything more dangerous than a clipboard. No insignia, no name tape, just a quiet woman in standard BDUs carrying a notepad. But when she reached across the conference table to refill the general's cup, her sleeve pulled back just enough to expose something on her finger that made every officer in that room go silent. A ring that wasn't just jewelry. It was proof of the deadliest training program in the military. Staff Sergeant Lisa Martinez didn't look like much that Tuesday morning at Camp Pendleton, California. Standard issue ACUs that had seen better days. Her dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun. No fancy equipment hanging from her belt. Just another face in the crowd moving through the morning shift change on the sprawling marine installation. She carried herself with that unremarkable stride of someone who knew how to blend in, how to be useful without drawing attention. The kind of soldier who gets things done while everyone else is busy looking important. She was checking inventory sheets outside the supply depot when Major Bradley Hoffman came strutting across the compound. You could spot him from 100 yards away, chest puffed out, boots polished to mirror shine, walking like he owned every square inch of California soil around them. The kind of officer who'd never seen real combat, but made sure everyone knew he was in charge. Martinez, he barked, not even breaking stride. "Drop what you're doing. I need you on depot security detail." Lisa looked up from her clipboard, expression neutral. "Copy that, sir." "Which depot?" "Ammunition storage perimeter guard." He gestured toward the heavily fenced compound at the far end of base. "We got some VIP inspection coming through later. Command wants extra eyes on our explosives." She nodded once. "Duration of assignment, sir." Hoffman barely looked at her, already scanning the compound for his next target. "Indefinite. Grab your gear and post up." And Martinez, he finally made eye contact, that condescending smile creeping across his face. "Try to stay awake out there. I know guard duty isn't exactly stimulating work." Lisa's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but her voice remained steady. "Understood, sir." Hoffman was already walking away, probably mentally patting himself on the back for solving his security problem with minimal effort. Just stick the quiet woman with no flashy credentials on fence duty. Let her stare at concrete bunkers while the real soldiers handled important business. If he'd bothered to ask Lisa about her background, he might have made different choices. But Major Hoffman wasn't the asking type. The ammunition depot sat behind 3 layers of chain link topped with razor wire, concrete barriers, and more warning signs than a nuclear facility. Lisa took her position at the main checkpoint, settling into the guard shack with a rifle, radio, and a thermos of coffee that would probably taste like motor oil by noon. Most soldiers hated this detail. Hours of staring at empty California landscape, checking the same perimeter, logging the same all-clear reports every 15 minutes. Lisa found it peaceful. No politics, no posturing, just professional vigilance. The kind of work that kept people alive even when they never knew it. She had been on post for about 2 hours when the radio crackled. "All stations be advised. VIP convoy approaching main gate. Maintain heightened security posture." Through the morning mist rising off the compound, Lisa spotted 3 black SUVs rolling toward the base entrance. Not the usual olive drab vehicles they use for routine operations. These were serious machines with tinted windows and antennas sprouting from their roofs like electronic porcupines. The convoy cleared the main gate and headed directly toward her position. Lisa stepped out of the guard shack, rifle held in the ready position, watching as the lead vehicle approached the ammunition depot checkpoint. The SUV stopped 20 feet from the gate. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a man who moved like controlled lightning. Medium height, weathered face, eyes that took in everything without seeming to look at anything specific. No name tape on his uniform. Lisa recognized the bearing immediately. Special Operations, the real deal. Behind him, 5 more operators emerged from the vehicles, each one carrying themselves with that same lethal confidence. They weren't here for a routine inspection. The team leader approached the checkpoint, and Lisa stepped forward to verify credentials, standard protocol, regardless of who they were. "Ma'am," the operator said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd earned every word he spoke. "Commander James Blake, Team 7. We're here for ordnance retrieval." Lisa checked his authorization papers with the same thoroughness she'd shown her morning inventory. Everything checked out, but something in his demeanor suggested this wasn't routine business. "All clear, Commander," she said, stepping aside to open the gate. "Anything specific you need from depot security during your operation?" Commander Blake paused, studying her face for a moment. There was something in his expression, recognition maybe, or respect. "Just keep doing exactly what you're doing. Thank God you're the one protecting this place." The sharp voice cut through the morning air like a buzzsaw. Major Bradley Hoffman was marching toward the checkpoint, his face already red with the kind of indignation that came from not being immediately informed about everything happening on his base. Lisa stepped out of the guard shack, clipboard in hand. "Sir, what the hell is going on here? I just got word that some special operations team is ransacking my ammunition depot without proper notification through command channels, and you just let them in." "Authorization checked out, sir." Commander Blake presented valid retrieval orders signed by. "I don't care what papers they showed you." Hoffman snapped, stepping closer. "You're a guard, not a decision-maker. You should have called me the second they showed up." Through the fence, Lisa could see Commander Blake's team methodically searching through specific ordnance containers. They weren't taking anything yet, just cataloging, photographing, treating everything with the careful attention of people who knew exactly what they were looking for. "Sir, protocol states that valid authorization doesn't require—" "Don't quote protocol to me, Martinez." Hoffman's voice was getting louder, the kind of public dressing down designed to reassert authority. "You're on this detail because it's simple. Check IDs, open gates, call superiors when anything unusual happens. Somehow, you manage to screw up the easiest job on base." A few other soldiers had started drifting over, drawn by the commotion. Hoffman seemed to feed off the audience, his chest puffing out even more. "Maybe next time I'll put someone with actual military judgment on sensitive assignments instead of—" "Is there a problem here?" Commander Blake's voice was quiet, but it cut through Hoffman's tirade like a blade. The SEAL commander had approached without anyone noticing, moving with that supernatural stealth that separated special operations from regular military. Hoffman spun around, immediately switching to his command voice. "Commander, I'm Major Hoffman, Base Operations. I need to understand why my security personnel weren't properly briefed about your mission parameters. Your security personnel performed flawlessly. Professional, thorough by the book. Exactly what you'd want protecting sensitive ordnance. Well, yes, of course, but proper notification channels were followed completely." Blake held up a tablet showing digital authorization forms. "Your staff sergeant here verified everything according to current SOPs. If there's a communication breakdown in your command structure, that's not a security issue." The SEAL team finished their work an hour later, loading several unmarked containers into their vehicles with the kind of careful handling reserved for items that could level city blocks if mishandled. Lisa watched from her post, noting how they double-checked every securing strap, how they communicated in the shorthand of people who'd worked together through situations where mistakes meant body bags. Commander Blake approached her checkpoint one final time, carrying a tablet and wearing an expression she couldn't quite read. "Staff Sergeant, we're departing. Everything's been logged and accounted for." She stepped forward to verify the inventory sheets, standard protocol for any ordnance removal. Blake handed her the tablet, but as she scrolled through the digital forms, something caught her eye. The authorization codes weren't routine. These were black project designators, the kind that didn't exist in normal military databases. Someone had requested very specific ordnance for very specific purposes, and it wasn't the kind of mission that got briefed to regular Army personnel. Blake was watching her face as she processed the information. "Questions, Staff Sergeant?" Lisa looked up from the tablet, meeting his steady gaze. "No questions, sir. Just wondering why ordnance this sensitive was stored at a regular Marine installation. Sometimes the safest place to hide something is in plain sight, and sometimes you need the right person watching over it." Before she could respond, the radio on her belt crackled to life. "All stations, this is command. Be advised, Major Hoffman is conducting unscheduled security inspections. All personnel, maintain ready posture. Blake raised an eyebrow. Your major seems thorough. He's covering his bases, sir. Probably wants to make sure everything looks regulation after your visit. Probably. Blake paused, then seemed to make a decision. Staff Sergeant, can I ask you something off the record? Lisa glanced around. Blake's team was securing their vehicles, but they were still within earshot. Whatever he wanted to discuss, he wasn't worried about his people hearing it. Of course, sir. How long were you planning to stay invisible? The question hit like a physical blow. Lisa's training took over, keeping her expression neutral, but inside alarms were going off. Blake knew. Somehow, this SEAL commander she'd never met before today knew exactly who she was. I'm not sure what you mean, sir. Blake smiled, but it wasn't condescending. It was the kind of smile you gave someone you respected for their operational security, but needed them to know the game was up. Lisa Martinez, formerly Captain Lisa Martinez, 75th Ranger Regiment, decorated for actions in Syria, classified operations in 3 other theaters, expert in demolitions, close quarters combat, and somehow managing to disappear from official records when things got too complicated. Lisa's blood went cold. Sir, I think you have me confused with someone else. The woman who single-handedly held off a Taliban assault team for 6 hours while protecting a downed Black Hawk crew. Blake continued quietly. The same woman who disappeared from the Army rolls after testifying in a classified hearing about rules of engagement violations by her commanding officer. The world seemed to narrow down to just the 2 of them standing by that chain-link fence. Lisa's mind was racing through possibilities, calculating threats, trying to figure out how much Blake actually knew and what he intended to do with the information. Commander, if you're suggesting, I'm not suggesting anything. Blake's voice remained calm, professional. I am stating facts. Facts that explain why a decorated Ranger captain is pulling guard duty as a staff sergeant at Camp Pendleton under what I'm guessing is a carefully constructed new identity. He stepped closer, lowering his voice even further. Facts that also explain why I requested you specifically for this assignment. That stopped Lisa cold. You requested me. The ordnance we just retrieved, it's going to need someone watching over it at its next location. Someone with impeccable credentials and a talent for staying off official radars. Blake pulled out a business card, plain white, with just a phone number. Someone exactly like you. Lisa stared at the card. What kind of assignment? The kind that doesn't exist on paper, the kind that requires someone who's already proven they'll do the right thing, even when the chain of command gets complicated. Before she could respond, they heard boots on gravel. Major Hoffman was approaching with 2 MPs in tow, his face set in that determined expression of someone about to make a point. Blake pocketed the card smoothly. Think about it, Captain. The offer stands. It's Staff Sergeant, Lisa said automatically. Not where I'm going, it isn't. Blake nodded toward Hoffman's approaching group. Your major's about to have some questions. I suggest you answer them the same way you've been answering everyone else's for the past 6 months. As Hoffman reached the checkpoint, Blake straightened into his official demeanor. Major, everything's accounted for. Your security procedures were exemplary. But Hoffman wasn't looking at Blake. His eyes were fixed on Lisa with the kind of suspicion that came from feeling like everyone knew something he didn't. Commander, I need to ask a few questions about security protocols during your operation. Major Hoffman's interrogation started before Commander Blake's convoy had even cleared the main gate. The 2 MPs flanked Lisa like she was a security threat, while Hoffman paced in front of the guard shack with all the subtlety of a prosecutor building a case. Let's start from the beginning. Martinez, what time did the SEAL team arrive? 0847 hours, sir. Lisa's voice remained steady, professional. She'd been through interrogations before, though never by someone with Hoffman's limited imagination. And they just showed up. No advance notice, no coordination through proper channels. They followed standard protocol for classified ordnance retrieval, sir. Authorization was verified and logged. Hoffman stopped pacing. See, that's what bothers me. Standard protocol would have included notification to base command. I should have been briefed. One of the MPs, a young specialist named Davis, shifted uncomfortably. Even he seemed to understand that Hoffman was fishing in empty water, looking for violations that didn't exist. "Sir," Lisa said carefully, the authorization codes they presented were above base command level. The system showed valid approval from, "I don't care what the system showed." Hoffman snapped. "I care about a staff sergeant making operational decisions without consulting superiors. What were they taking from the depot?" "Classified ordnance, sir. Inventory numbers are in the system." "What kind of classified ordnance?" "Above my clearance level, sir." That was technically true. The ordnance Blake's team had retrieved was so far above standard classification levels that it existed in a different universe than Hoffman's security clearance. "Above your clearance level," Hoffman's voice pitched higher. "Then how did you verify they were authorized to take it?" "Digital authorization system, sir. The same way any classified material gets verified. And you didn't think to call me when special operations showed up to collect explosives you can't even identify." Before Lisa could answer, her radio crackled. "Base command to Major Hoffman. Please report to the colonel's office immediately." Hoffman's face went through several interesting color changes. Being summoned to explain yourself to a full colonel was never a good sign, especially when you just spent an hour trying to find fault with procedures that had apparently been approved at levels you didn't even know existed. "This isn't over, Martinez," he muttered, gesturing for the MPs to follow him. "I want a complete written report, and I mean complete. Every detail, every conversation, every procedure you followed." As they walked away, Specialist Davis glanced back over his shoulder with something that looked almost like respect. Word was already spreading through the enlisted ranks that Quiet Staff Sergeant Martinez had somehow handled a situation that had left their major scrambling to cover his own rear end. Lisa waited until they were out of sight, then pulled out the card Commander Blake had given her. Just a phone number, but she could feel the weight of the decision it represented. A chance to step back into the world she'd walked away from, to use skills she'd been forced to bury under layers of bureaucratic paperwork and security clearances. Her radio crackled again. "Staff Sergeant Martinez, report to the colonel's office." The walk across base gave her time to think, to prepare for questions she'd probably been expecting since the day she'd arrived at Camp Pendleton. Colonel Patricia Wade was old-school Marine, the kind of officer who'd earned her rank through competence rather than politics. If anyone was going to see through the carefully constructed story of Staff Sergeant Lisa Martinez, it would be her. Colonel Wade looked up from her computer as Lisa knocked. "Enter and close the door behind you." Lisa took a position at attention in front of the desk, but Wade gestured for her to sit. That was either a very good sign or a very bad one. "Relax, Staff Sergeant. This isn't a formal inquiry." Wade leaned back at her chair. "I just had an interesting conversation with Major Hoffman. He seems to think you overstepped your authority during today's ordnance retrieval operation." "I followed standard procedures, ma'am." "I know you did." Wade pulled up something on her computer screen. "I also just got off the phone with some people in Washington who wanted to make sure our cooperation with today's operation was appreciated." She turned the monitor so Lisa could see it. A commendation letter already drafted praising the professionalism and competence of Camp Pendleton security personnel during a sensitive classified operation. "Seems Commander Blake was impressed with our security protocols." Wade continued, "Specifically mentioned the thoroughness and military bearing of our ammunition depot security personnel." Lisa remained silent, sensing there was more coming. Wade studied her for a long moment. "Staff Sergeant, in my experience, SEAL commanders don't usually take time to write glowing reviews of base security guards, unless there's something about that security guard that makes her worth noticing." The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of unasked questions and carefully maintained cover stories. Finally, Wade leaned forward. "I don't know who you really are, Staff Sergeant Martinez. And frankly, I don't need to know. What I need to know is that you're the kind of soldier who can handle sensitive assignments without creating problems for my command." "Yes, ma'am." "Good, because I have a feeling this won't be the last time interesting people show up requesting our cooperation." 2 days later, Lisa was back at the ammunition depot, but the routine had changed. Word of her interaction with the SEAL team had spread through the base like wildfire, carried by the kind of whispered conversations that happened in chow lines and motor pools. Not the full story, nobody knew that, but enough pieces to make people look at her differently. The young specialist who delivered supply requisitions now knocked on the guard shack door instead of just dropping papers through the slot. The motor pool sergeant who used to barely acknowledge her existence had started tipping his cap when their paths crossed. On Thursday afternoon, her quiet contemplation was interrupted by an unexpected visitor. Colonel Wade's aide, a sharp young lieutenant named Jennifer Brooks, appeared at the checkpoint with the kind of urgent energy that usually meant someone was about to have a very bad day. "Staff Sergeant, the colonel needs to see you immediately. Problem with my security report." "Not exactly." Brooks glanced around, then lowered her voice. "We've got visitors, the kind that don't appear on official schedules." The walk to the administration building felt longer than usual. Brooks wasn't volunteering any additional information, which meant whatever was waiting for her was either too classified to discuss in the open or too politically sensitive to risk speculation. Colonel Wade's outer office was occupied by two men in expensive suits who radiated the kind of quiet authority that came from alphabet agencies most people pretended didn't exist. They looked up as Lisa entered, and she caught the subtle evaluation in their eyes, the way they cataloged potential threats and assets in the same glance. Staff Sergeant Martinez, the older one, stood extending his hand. "Agent Carson, Department of Defense." "This is Agent Williams." Lisa shook hands with both men, noting the firm grips and steady eye contact of people who were very good at their jobs. "Gentlemen, we'd like to ask you a few questions about your interaction with Commander Blake's team earlier this week." Before Lisa could respond, Colonel Wade's office door opened. "Bring her in," came the colonel's voice. The inner office felt crowded with 5 people, but Wade had arranged chairs in a way that made it feel more like a briefing than an interrogation. Still, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to learn something that would change everything. "Staff Sergeant, these gentlemen are here about the ordnance that was retrieved from our depot. It seems there's been a development." Agent Carson opened a tablet and turned it toward her. "Are you familiar with this location?" The satellite image showed a compound in what looked like desert terrain. Concrete buildings, defensive positions, the kind of hardened facility that suggested either very valuable assets or very dangerous enemies. "No, sir. It's in Somalia," Williams added. 3 days ago, it was attacked by a coordinated force of approximately 40 combatants. The attack was repelled, but barely. Agent Carson swiped to the next image, showing blast damage and scorched earth around the compound's perimeter. "The ordnance that Commander Blake retrieved from your depot was used to reinforce the defensive positions at this facility. Without it, the attack would have succeeded." Lisa studied the images, her tactical mind automatically assessing the defensive layout, the attack patterns, the resources that would have been required to hold off a force that size. What was being defended? A joint intelligence gathering facility, Wade answered. The kind that doesn't exist on any official maps. Williams leaned forward. "Staff Sergeant, the reason we're here is that intelligence gathered from the captured attackers suggests they had detailed knowledge of our security procedures. Someone told them exactly when that ordnance would be vulnerable during transport." The implications hit Lisa like cold water. "You think there was a leak?" "We know there was a leak," Carson said flatly. "What we don't know is where it came from." The ordnance retrieval operation involved exactly 7 people. Commander Blake's 5-man team, you and Major Hoffman. "Blake's team is above suspicion," Wade added. "They've been vetted at levels that don't have names. That leaves base personnel." Lisa felt the walls closing in. "You think it was me?" "We think," Carson said carefully, "that someone with detailed knowledge of the retrieval operation provided information to hostile forces, someone who knew timing, routes, and defensive capabilities. And since you were the only base personnel with direct access to operational details," Williams spread his hands in a gesture that managed to seem both apologetic and accusatory. Lisa looked around the room, seeing the careful neutrality on Colonel Wade's face, the professional assessment in the agent's eyes. After 6 months of careful anonymity, her past had finally caught up with her, but not in the way she'd expected. "Gentlemen," she said quietly, "I think you'd better sit down because there are some things about Staff Sergeant Martinez that you need to understand." The silence in Colonel Wade's office stretched like a taut wire. Agent Carson and Williams exchanged glances, their professional composure showing the first cracks of uncertainty. My name isn't really Lisa Martinez. Carson's hand moved instinctively toward his jacket, where Lisa assumed he kept either a weapon or recording device. Wade held up a warning finger. 6 months ago, I was Captain Lisa Barrett, 75th Ranger Regiment, 2nd Battalion, decorated for actions in Syria, Afghanistan, and 2 other theaters that don't appear in public records. Williams pulled out a tablet, fingers flying across the screen. There's no record of a Captain Barrett in recent because those records were sealed. Wade interrupted quietly. Weren't they, Captain? The title hung in the air like an accusation. Lisa nodded slowly. I testified before a closed congressional hearing about rules of engagement violations by my commanding officer, Colonel Marcus Webb. He'd been ordering strikes on civilian targets, covering it up in after-action reports. When I refused to falsify intelligence assessments, he had me transferred to punishment details. Carson leaned forward. What kind of punishment details? The kind where talented officers get sent to places where they die accidentally. Lisa's voice remained steady, but there was steel underneath. Webb had connections, political protection. When my testimony threatened to expose his operations, certain people decided the problem wasn't his war crimes. The problem was me. Williams was still scrolling through his tablet, his frown deepening. I'm showing classified flags all over your service record, sections that require clearances we don't have. That's because after I testified, someone very high up the chain realized I was right about Webb. But they also realized that prosecuting a decorated colonel would raise uncomfortable questions about who else knew what he was doing. Wade crossed her arms. So they offered you a deal. Disappear voluntarily, accept a reduction in rank and a new identity, and Webb would be quietly retired instead of court-martialed. Refuse, and my accident-prone reassignments would continue until the problem solved itself permanently. The 2 agents sat back in their chairs, absorbing implications that reached far beyond their original investigation. Carson was the first to recover. So he became Staff Sergeant Lisa Martinez. New Social Security number, new service records, assignment to Camp Pendleton where nobody asks uncomfortable questions about quiet soldiers who do their jobs. She met his eyes. The perfect place to disappear. Except Commander Blake recognized you. Blake was part of a joint operation I supported in Afghanistan. I provided intelligence assessments that saved his team from walking into an ambush. He knew my real name, my real record. Wade pulled out a manila folder from her desk drawer, which explains why when I requested your full service record after Blake's visit, I got a phone call from the Pentagon telling me to stop asking questions. She opened the folder revealing heavily redacted documents with more black ink than text. Captain Barrett commendations include a silver star, 2 bronze stars, and a Purple Heart. Her tactical assessments were used to plan 14 successful special operations missions. Her testimony before Congress led to the investigation of procurement fraud worth approximately $200 million. Carson and Williams exchanged looks that suggested their investigation had just become significantly more complicated. Agent Carson, Lisa said quietly, "You're looking for someone who leaked operational details about the retrieval operation. Someone with access to timing, routes, and defensive capabilities." "That's correct." "Then you're looking for Major Hoffman." The accusation landed like a thunderclap. Wade straightened in her chair while both agents leaned forward. "That's a serious allegation, Staff Sergeant," Williams said carefully. "It's also the only one that makes sense." Lisa counted off points on her fingers. Hoffman was obsessed with being informed about operations above his clearance level. He questioned the authorization procedures, demanded detailed reports, and made a point of cataloging information he had no operational need to know. Carson was taking notes now. More importantly, he was furious about being bypassed in the command structure. The kind of furious that makes people do stupid things to prove their importance. You think he leaked classified information because his feelings were hurt? Williams sounded skeptical. "I think he leaked information because someone convinced him he was protecting proper military procedure by ensuring appropriate oversight of special operations." The question is who convinced him and how much they paid him for his patriotic duty. Wade was nodding slowly. It fits his personality profile. Hoffman's always been more concerned with process than results, more interested in being important than being effective. There's one way to find out, Carson said, reaching for his phone. We run a full financial investigation, check his communications, see who he's been talking to outside official channels. As he started dialing, Lisa felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. For 6 months, she'd been hiding from her past, afraid that her real identity would bring nothing but trouble. Instead, it might be exactly what was needed to catch a traitor. The investigation moved fast. Within 6 hours, Agent Carson's team had Major Hoffman's financial records spread across Colonel Wade's conference table like evidence in a murder case. Bank statements, credit card transactions, phone records, and digital communications painted a picture of a man living beyond his military salary. 3 payments of $15,000 each over the past 2 months, Williams announced, pointing to highlighted entries, all from shell companies that trace back to a private security firm with contracts in Somalia. Wade studied the documents with the grim expression of a commander who just discovered cancer in her own unit. Marcus Security Solutions. I've heard that name before. It's a front company, legitimate enough to have government contracts, dirty enough to work both sides when the price is right. Run by former military officers who weren't particular about which flag they saluted as long as the pay was good. Lisa recognized the type. Every conflict zone had them. Former soldiers who decided patriotism was less profitable than pragmatism. What was Hoffman giving them? Everything. Williams pulled up intercepted communications on his tablet. Base security protocols, ammunition depot inventory schedules, personnel assignments, even details about your background check when he requested your service records after Blake's visit. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Hoffman's obsession with proper procedures hadn't been about military discipline. It had been about gathering sellable intelligence from operations he should never have known about. There's more, Carson added grimly. Communication intercepts show Hoffman was specifically tasked with identifying when sensitive ordnance would be moved. The attack on the Somalia facility was timed precisely because they knew when the defensive upgrades would be in transit. Wade's jaw tightened. How many operations has he compromised? We're still analyzing, but preliminary assessment suggests at least 6 classified missions over the past year. Williams closed his tablet. American soldiers died because of information he provided. The room fell silent as the full scope of Hoffman's betrayal settled over them. This wasn't just about money or wounded pride. This was treason in its purest form, paid for in American blood. Where is he now? Lisa asked. That's the problem, Carson said. Hoffman didn't report for duty this morning. His apartment is cleaned out and his car was found abandoned at San Diego International Airport. Someone tipped him off. The takedown happened at dawn on a Tuesday morning, coordinated across 7 states by the largest joint counterintelligence operation in recent military history. FBI tactical teams, military police, and cyber warfare specialists moved simultaneously against Marcus security facilities, safe houses, and the homes of compromised military personnel, whose names Lisa had helped provide during 2 weeks of deep cover operations. At Camp Pendleton, Lisa stood in Colonel Wade's office watching news coverage of arrests from Virginia to California. 37 people in custody, including Peterson, Walsh, and a technical team that had been systematically penetrating military networks for 3 years. More importantly, they'd recovered client lists that revealed which hostile intelligence services had been purchasing American military secrets. Colonel Wade said, using the rank that had been officially restored along with Lisa's full service record. Preliminary damage assessment suggests Marcus Security compromised over 200 classified operations during their period of activity. Agent Carson, who'd flown in from Washington for the debriefing, added grimly, "We're still calculating American casualties that resulted from intelligence they provided to hostile forces." Somalia was just the beginning. The scope of the betrayal was staggering. Marcus Security had identified and recruited 17 military personnel across 9 installations, using them to steal classified information that was sold to terrorist organizations, foreign intelligence services, and private military contractors working against American interests. Captain, what you accomplished required extraordinary courage and professional skill. Walking into that network, maintaining your cover while gathering evidence, risking your life to protect American soldiers. That's exactly the kind of service this country depends on. Thank you, ma'am, but I had help. Lisa pulled out the business card Blake had given her weeks earlier. Sir, I believe this belongs to you. Blake's voice came from the office doorway. Actually, Captain, I think you've earned a right to keep it. The SEAL commander entered with the quiet confidence that had marked their first meeting. As Lisa walked back across Camp Pendleton toward the ammunition depot, where this had all started, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Pride in her service and confidence in her abilities. She was no longer hiding from who she was.